And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another episode of my ongoing weekly series Valiant till the Last. It has been a minute since our last episode. Whilst I upload these onto YouTube on a weekly basis, I try to film them a little bit in advance of that, and I've had a bit of a break and a bit of a gap between reading Valiant for a little while due to health issues, unfortunately. However, we're back into it, and so we're back into the series where I am reading every single Valiant Deluxe edition one at a time. And today I read XO Manowar Volume 2, Volume 1. So let me explain what I mean by that. What's happened here is that with XO Manowar, after the first 50 issues, which are the hardcovers that we've been looking at for the last few weeks, the numbering reverted back to number 1. And this is therefore the second volume of XO Manowar after the 2012 Valiant reboot. So let's have a look at it here. We've got a completely different kind of visual style and visual design, with this new logo, this new top banner, this image here, written by Matt Kint of Divinity fame, Divinity and Unity. Completely different kind of spine. We'll talk more about the spines next time and what this looks like on the shelf. And then Deluxe Edition 1. And next week we'll be looking at Deluxe Edition 2. The back is like this as well, again keeping with the yellow theme and so on. Again, relatively conventional layout. Let's have a look at the French flaps. So what we have here is the standard French flap on the front, Creator's flap on the back. Let's get the dust jacket off. And what we see here is an interesting blocking or emboss there. We've got XO Manowar in kind of gold, if you can see. Can you see that? Yeah, it's in gold. And then on the spine, again, we've got it blocked as XO Manowar there. So this is going to look quite different to the previous XO Manowars on your shelf. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more next time. So that's the spine there, looking nice and clean. And here's the back. Alright, let's get into it. So the end leaves are black, absolutely standard, and then it has a book 1. So keep in mind this is book 1 of the second volume after the first 50 issues that we've read. So let's get into it. Now, this contains 4 story arcs. I don't know, I assume they're collected as 4 different trade paperbacks. What these 4 story arcs consist of is the first one, Soldier, which contains part of XO Manowar 50 that was actually collected in the last deluxe edition we looked at, which was volume 5. And then also XO Manowar 1 to 3, and some stuff from the Free Comic Book Day special. It then has 4 till 6, 7 till 10, and 11 till 14, and then some behind the scenes stuff as well. So let's have a look at it and see what this is like. It has the usual formatting, so you can see here Soldier and the details. Alright. Now this, or these couple of pages might be familiar because these are in the last one, Deluxe Edition 5, which kind of has this like crazy backdrop and then just Arik on a throne. But then Volume 1, or Volume 2 rather, Issue 1 starts in earnest. So what is the premise behind this? Well, this entire comic picks up a fair bit after the last XO Manowar series. It's actually set on an alien planet. Long story short, it's basically a gladiator. He starts off as a farmer. He's trying to protect the person that he's with and the village that he's from and so on. Gets recruited into an army, ends up fighting the army, ends up defeating loads of bad guys, ends up getting handpicked by the Emperor to continue defeating loads of bad guys, and ends up taking over and sort of defeating the Empire and winning the day and so on and so forth. I mean, in that sense, it's a relatively predictable story arc. One thing I will point out is that the majority of the dynamic here is about Arik's dynamic with the armour, and his relationship with the XO Manowar armour has changed quite substantially since the last time we saw him. For a start, the armour speaks, which is weird. Now, I remember I saw this during Harbinger Wars 2, that the armour was actually speaking and had its own voice and so on, and I guess this is where that's first introduced. So he has a strange kind of antagonistic relationship with the armour. He doesn't really want to have it, but he's kind of obliged to use it, etc, etc. The armour is now sentient and has its own voice and speaks, and it's all just a little bit surreal, to be honest. What else can I say? The artwork, very, very solid throughout, a variety of different artists, including Clayton Crane, who I'm a big fan of. Matt Kint's writing is decent, although this overall felt a little bit plodding and formulaic. I think one of the flaws of the idea of taking a character like Arik and putting him in a scenario where he's a human on an alien world is it's kind of playing on the fish out of water trope, where he's sort of like a man out of his element. And the thing is, Arik, in and of himself, was already that. He was a Visigoth from the 5th century in the 21st century, and so he's already a fish out of water. Moving him into a space scenario where he's fighting aliens on an alien homeworld is kind of like, well, it's still fish out of water, although to an extent much less so, because he's no longer a man out of time, he's just a man out of place. So I'm not entirely sure what this added to the narrative and the direction of his character. Another thing this kind of reminded me of was it reminded me of Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther run, or rather the latter parts of Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther run. If you read that, basically it's about the intergalactic empire of Wakanda, so it just randomly starts in media res where T'Challa is on another planet as, you know, part of or a slave within an intergalactic Wakandan empire. And it uses a lot of flashbacks and various things to try to explain how it got to that point. That's kind of what happens here. Like the protagonist here is an intergalactic empire, other side of the universe, doing various things, and then it uses flashbacks to explain really what drove him from Earth and why he's here and what he's doing. So I don't know, it felt to me like there was some kind of tonal similarities. And I wasn't a massive fan of Ta-Nehisi Coates' run, and I've got to be honest, this was decent, but it wasn't brilliant. And the final conflict and the final resolution of that conflict was also a little bit underwhelming. I've seen much bigger battles in the Valiant universe, like in Armor Hunters and things like that. And so this was just, whilst not underwhelming, it also wasn't really a very fulfilling or satisfying finale. What you have here is issue 14, which is largely just Arik by himself, just kind of being a bit maudlin. The only reason that I mention this is that whilst sort of riddled by flashbacks and sort of finally providing some context as to why Arik is in space and on another planet, what it also does is it ends with, bear with me, it ends with this cliffhangery bit here, if you'll notice, where it says, you know, continued in Harbinger Wars 2. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure how much that cliffhanger actually makes sense. Arik was in Harbinger Wars 2, but not in a hugely critical capacity. Like he was important in it, and he was in it, and obviously the armor itself was talking to him at that point. But yeah, the premise behind this is that he gets pulled back from where he is on an alien planet, millions and millions of light years away, and he comes back to Earth because he's needed for Harbinger Wars 2. And it's like, really? Harbinger Wars 2, I've read it, and it's mainly this live wire kicking off with the government. It's not really something that requires Thor in an Iron Man suit to travel across the universe to come give her a hand. So, I don't know, part of this adds into my general sort of questions about what was meant to be the Harbinger Wars 2 event, as opposed to what actually was the Harbinger Wars 2 event. Then we've got standard behind the scenes. Pretty good stuff, usual kind of like pencils, scripts, DVD style commentary, some gallery stuff, some really impressive artwork here. And that is that. So that's issues 1 to 14 of Exo Manowar Volume 2, or the 2017 series, as it's sometimes referred to. Was it good? Yeah, it was pretty good. Was it brilliant? No, it was not. Am I going to read the next one? Well, of course. I mean, I already have the next one, and I'll be reading that next week as Exo Manowar Volume 2. This is decent. I'm glad I got it in my collection because, you know, I've enjoyed most of Valiant so far. But at the same time, this feels a little bit like, what's the best way to put it? It's not a step backwards. This is more like just treading water for the character in a lot of ways. It's Arik just being dissatisfied with being Arik, being a fish out of water in a slightly different context, which is arguably less interesting. The storyline is to some extent formulaic. The action is cool, some of the dialogue is cool, the artwork is great. But yeah, it's generally like just competent comics as opposed to great comics. Also slightly different design and slightly different feel, kind of indicating we're moving into a different era of Valiant here. Again, we're getting into kind of the post-DMG takeover of Valiant Entertainment, and the last 2 or 3 years up until now, which is kind of a slightly different era of Valiant anyway. Okay, cool. I'll try and keep it short and sweet. That's all I wanted to say about this. Did you read it? What do you think about it? Let me know. Yeah, and next time we'll be reading Exo Manowar Book 02.
All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.